And we're joined at the desk now by Iowa Republican Congressman Steve King. And Congressman King, want to get right to headline in several of the papers today on the delay that was announced for some businesses under the Affordable Care Act. Here's the headline from the Washington Times: Obama changes health care rules again. Want to get your response to this announcement yesterday.
I gave a 1-hour speech on this last night, a lot on this topic. And, you know, when the president takes an oath of office, implicit in that, and specifically within the Constitution, his requirement that he take care that the laws be faithfully executed. Now, it is a violation of the Constitution for the president to fail to enforce the laws unless you're within the category of prosecutorial discretion. And when the president refuses to enforce the laws that were signed by a previous president, that's a constitutional violation. But I don't think we've ever had a president that refuses to abide by the laws that he signed, let alone the law that has his name on it, ObamaCare. This is a breathtaking overreach of the president, and the Congress is sitting in a place where we don't have a very good tool to restrain him. But it's clearly a violation of the Constitution, and the law says that the implementation of ObamaCare for employers shall take place in each month after December of 2013. He doesn't have any authority to extend it. He's doing this anyway because he understands that Congress really doesn't have a lever to put the brakes on him and stop him.
And so is this the last delay, you think, when it comes to the Affordable Care Act?
I think I said sometime almost a year ago that we don't know what the law is anymore because it's been changed so many times sometimes by a third-tier website in the U.S. Treasury, sometimes by a press conference by the president, sometimes by an executive edict. I think the law will change whenever it's convenient. And this looks to me like it's clearly a political decision. But you know, the president he has to assume that if he has to have changes in this law to get it implemented, he must be presuming that if he comes to Congress and lays his cards face out up on the table, that he's not going to get a fair shake. And I would say we want to help the people in this country, and you can't do business if you can't negotiate with the president, and the president should not be doing business outside the Constitution.
I want to move quickly over to the debt ceiling and what's being formulated by Republicans, House Republicans, on raising the debt ceiling. Can you give us sort of the latest and where you stand on that plan that House Republican leaders are coming up with?
We're probably already going to be behind the curve this morning, but we haven't met on that since late last night. And I think there's some people that had some sleepless nights on the debt ceiling, John. Yesterday, the discussion was about extending the debt ceiling. There seems to be, I'll say, an acceptance of the idea that it needs to be extended for a year. I don't agree with that. I'd rather do it over a short period of time, so we've got some restraint between now and the November election, but that's not a consensus among the majority in the Congress today. So then the question becomes, what do we attach to it so that there at least is some improvement in policy? And a whole number of ideas have been rolled out there. For example, to attach to it an end to the bailout of insurance companies. That's got some support. Another one might be to change the 30-hour work week within Obamacare to a 40-hour work week, because people that have full-time jobs now are being pushed back to part-time, so the employers don't have to comply with Obamacare. That should make a difference. It makes a difference as the president moves the ball on Obamacare. What we might attach to that is still an open question, and I think in the end we'll go through some maneuverings here. We can perhaps force some votes in the United States Senate that will clarify where especially Senate Democrats stand. But in the end, I expect there's going to be the thing they call the clean debt ceiling come back to the floor of the House in some fashion.
And the Washington Post, in writing about the back and forth over this debt ceiling increase, noted, we told our viewers earlier, that the proposal being formulated by Republicans marked a stark retreat from the confrontational approach Republicans adopted in 2011 when the Speaker $1.1 trillion in savings out of federal agency budgets in exchange for increasing the debt limit. Is that how you view this current measure?
I think, you know, giving just a frank and objective answer to this is that this government, having gone through a shutdown, and I have to remind people that Republicans in the House voted to fund every aspect of government to the limits of sequestration except for Obamacare. So this shutdown really was brought about because the president refused to accept those terms. But today we've gone through that, and after all of the political agony that's taken place over the shutdown, I think the will to see that again it just doesn't exist in Congress today. I think the president knows it, and I think he's decided that he's got more power, not less. And so at this point, then, I don't think that we see that big kind of confrontation, and I don't expect there's going to be any kind of a shutdown. There's going to be some kind of an agreement made, but it's not going to have the kind of leverage that took place that you mentioned in 2011.
If you want to talk to Iowa Republican Congressman Steve King, phone lines are open. Republicans can call at 202-585-3881. Democrats, 202-585-3880. Independents, 202-585-3882. And if you're outside the U.S., it's 202-585-3883. And Congressman, while folks are calling in, want to get to a subject that you are very passionate about, immigration and that debate that's happening on Capitol Hill. About 2 weeks ago, the House Republican leadership released their principles for immigration reform, which gave some folks hope that there was going to be some movement on immigration in the House. And then we see last week that the Speaker indicating that he didn't think immigration could move this year. Can you give us some insight into what happened between two weeks ago and that announcement from the Speaker last week?
I think the story really starts about a year ago when the movement came and started in hard in the Senate. The Senate, of course, has passed their Gang of Eight bill. That mobilized and galvanized some of us in the House. I know that there was a point that I spoke with Lou Barletta and I said we're going to have to organize. We decided to organize. We came back together. There were 3 of us. That was all. And that grew substantially over the last year. And so there have been a whole series of meetings. Sometimes they were taking place every week, discussing how we would push back against a Gang of Eight piece of legislation. But I noticed as we got closer, the leadership was taking a position in favor of something that I would describe as amnesty, and they would not. And as that inertia built, so did the resistance. And I watched as the pundits began to write more and speak up against it. Some people that were in favor were shifting the other way, that are opinion leaders in this country. And inside the Congress, we have freshmen and sophomores who had not been through an intense immigration debate for the most part. Their knowledge base was coming up. It seemed to all come together in Cambridge at the retreat. And inside that room, after all of that communication got, let's say, put into the middle of the thought process, there were 3 to 4 to 1 that stepped up and said, we can't do this, we should not do this, it's not good for America. It's in the first order, it's not good for America in the long term. Second is it's not good for Republicans either. There's no rational reason for us to give the president what he really wants to do, which is to divide Republicans. And I just take people back to the president's Christmas speech from Hawaii, where he called for extending unemployment benefits, increasing minimum wage, and the third piece was comprehensive immigration reform. All 3 of those proposals that were his agenda for 2014, unify Democrats, divide Republicans. That was his strategy, and it was so open and obvious. I just often reminded people, you should not take the bait. We need to focus on Obamacare, which is going to be necessary. If it's either going to be fixed or repealed, we've got to focus on it for this year. We shouldn't allow them to change the subject to something that the public really doesn't have in the top list of their priority. That came together, and I think the speaker understood that he wasn't going to be able to move. Even within the principles that he put out, they were written in such a broad way that all or almost all of the Gang of Eight's amnesty bill in the Senate would fit inside the Speaker's principles, and that really made us nervous when we saw that language.
We're talking with Steve King, Republican from Iowa, the 4th District of Iowa, also a member of the Republican Study Committee. Your House committees that you serve on, Agriculture, Judiciary, Small Business. He's here to answer your questions and take your comments. Barbara's up first in Arlington, Texas, on our line for Republicans. Barbara, good morning.
Good morning. First of all, I just want to commend Republican King. We love him in Texas. We just love him. But the thing that I think that the country doesn't realize here is I've been a registered nurse for 30 years. And last year, Parkland in Dallas had 1,700 illegal deliveries just in 1 month. And in Fort Worth, we had 680 deliveries at John Peter Smith. That's the county hospitals here. They've recently opened like 7 satellite clinics that give free prenatal care, and everything's free. If you get a C-section, vaginal delivery, anything, it's all free. And then we've hired new social service people that come in and sign them up for every entitlement out there. And I don't think the American public knows how bad this problem is. And I've seen that even if they don't even have a viable delivery, they still get signed up for everything. And they are partner, but they always come in as a single woman with 4 children, and they'll have a partner living there that's working and making wage, sometimes owning their own businesses.
I'm going to let Steve King, Congressman King, jump in here for a second. Congressman.
Well, thank you. Barbara, I appreciate you filling us in on that. I took some notes on that, and we're going to look into it a little bit further. These are the kind of stories, though, that I've heard especially out of Dallas. And I have been the author of legislation that puts an end to the automatic citizenship for being born on U.S. soil. I don't know of another country that does that. That becomes a magnet. That the data that I'm looking at shows that between 340 and 750,000 babies a year are born in America to parents where both of them are illegal. And so I do want to put an end to that, and I'd allow that citizenship for if you're born to one parent that's illegal. That's a different story. We'll give you citizenship in that. That's one of the pieces, and we have 80 different means-tested federal welfare programs in this country today. Many of them, as you said, are being offered by social services people that come right to the hospital to sign people up. You know, the push that is there to expand the dependency class and to grow the population of people that will vote for more and more benefits is very strong coming out of this White House. And the White House has taken the position that even work doesn't have merit anymore. It's a good thing if 2.5 million fewer equivalent jobs are gone, because that gives people more time to spend with their families. I think work is a good thing. I think citizenship is a precious thing, and I think that it should be earned, not something conferred. So we'll look into this a little more, but that's some pretty bracing data that you've talked about this morning. I know it's right there in front of you, and you live it.
Philip is in Centerville, Massachusetts, on our line for Democrats. Philip, good morning.
Good morning. Hello?
You're on the Washington Journal. Go ahead, Philip.
Yes, good morning, King. I have two questions. Well, you said earlier that that the president would not work with you, the Republicans. Everything he's for, you guys were against. And then you constantly breaking the Constitution with this Affordable Care Act, that every time he tries to delay something, he doesn't have the power, and that he's breaking, the Constitution. I say to you, if you guys can't tell him that he can't do it, then he's not breaking the law. Because if he was breaking the law, you guys would try to impeach him. So I know, and some other American knows, that you guys do not like him, and it's a shame, because you guys work for us. Y'all do not work for corporate America.
Okay, well, Philip, I'd say to you first that I'm actually on the record, in the congressional record. I personally like the president. I dislike what he's doing to our Constitution. And, the Congress has passed laws, even laws that I disagree with. And one of them that I brought up here, several of them I brought up, I worked against, I voted against, but yet they're the law. And I think they should be followed. I don't even like the policy that exists within it. I like the policy that the president has adopted as far as delaying the employer mandate. That's an improvement. It takes some of the relief of the burden of Obamacare off of employers, but it's unconstitutional. And when I say the president won't work with us, here's the example. We went through the government shutdown. The president refused to negotiate with the Congress. He just said, I'm not going to negotiate. Essentially closed his doors and said, I'm going to sit here and wait. So it isn't that Congress won't work with the president. It is the other way around. And the thing that you said about impeachment, that's something that we went through that in 1998. Bill Clinton's back in the news again today, and it was a painful thing for our country to go through. I'd like to fix this without that being part of the solution. But I appreciate your comments, and I understand what it looks like from your side too, Philip.
Here's Marie Tweet's perspective on this. She says, Mr. King, we are tired of Obama not enforcing laws. He needs to be impeached ASAP. Marie tweets on our Twitter page. If you follow that, it's at CSPAN WJ, the conversation going on there. Michael is up next from Imperial Beach, California, on our line for Independence. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, John. Good morning, Representative King. Representative King, I'd like to get your opinion on world income inequality. We've just learned from Oxfam that 85 people on this planet own as much wealth as 3.5 billion people. And in America, the 400 richest people have as much wealth as 100 million people. Do you think that is a problem in the future, and how would you what would you do to deal with that? Thank you, sir.
Okay. Well, I saw that story come through a little while back, too, and it caught my interest, and I appreciate you bringing it up. That's a lot of wealth concentrated in the hands of a few, there is no question. And yet, it hadn't troubled me before I saw the news, so I'm wondering how it affects my life or your life or anyone else's. I'm interested in this, that I want people to have upward mobility and opportunity to succeed, and equal opportunity to do that. And if there's all that wealth that's consolidated in those hands, I would want to take a look at the monopolies that might be disadvantaging consumers. But aside from that, if we've got our opportunity to succeed, let's step out there and do that. The biggest thing that I would bring for a change to that proposal would be to pass the fair tax, the national sales tax. What it does is it gives all of us a lot more opportunity. It takes all the tax off of production and puts it on consumption. That changes the balance of trade. It does everything good that anybody's tax policy does that is good. It does them all, and it does them all better. And there would be wealth created, and some of the rich people would get richer, but there would be a lot more people that would step into that category, and there would be a lot more jobs for all of us. So income inequality is not a phrase that our founding fathers considered, but they did consider the equality of opportunity, and I'm going to continue to press for that. Thank you.
We want to turn back to the subject of immigration. Here's the leader column from The Economist magazine from this past week. You've been very critical of President Obama as enforcing the laws that are on the books when it comes to immigration, and have said that that has led to some of the problems that we're seeing now. The headline from The Economist piece, Barack Obama, Deporter-in-Chief. The story notes that America is expelling illegal immigrants at 9 times the rate of 20 years ago, nearly 2 million so far under Barack Obama, easily outpacing any previous president. Border Patrol agents no longer just patrol the border. They scour the country for illegals to eject. The deportation machine costs more than all other areas of federal criminal law enforcement combined. And as part of that story, they also include a chart that talks about the levels of illegal alien removals under President Obama compared to President Bush, President Clinton, and George H.W. Bush, with the levels being higher during all 4 years under President Obama. Your response to those statements from The Economist?
I'm astonished to hear those numbers. I'm thinking back at a chart that I've seen that was produced by Jessica Vaughn of the Center for Immigration Studies not that long ago, that showed the deportation rates going clear back before 1986. It showed high deportation rates right in 1986, over 1 million a year. It showed the record of deportation for annual deportations. And by the way, these are removals that include a couple of different categories: those who are adjudicated for deportation and those who voluntarily return. And the president has been clear that the numbers are skewed because they have now shifted some of the deportation responsibilities that come from Border Patrol over to ICE, and that's shifted the numbers. But the highest deportation rate, removals in the country for history, was the last year of Bill Clinton, in the year 2000, about 1.8 million altogether. You count those that are at the border that are returned immediately, and those who are in the interior who are picked up and processed and then removed. And we've seen instead Bill Clinton's numbers Barack Obama's numbers go down to some number under 700,000 a year. And so I would say take a look at Jessica Vaughn's numbers. Let's match it up to this. I don't think those numbers are that high, but I'll take a look at that article.
And you get a lot of criticism from those in favor of immigration reform. How do you feel about being, here's a Mother Jones piece that calls you Washington's most anti-immigrant congressman?
It's a conflation of the language. Do they mean anti-illegal immigrant? Do they mean pro-rule of law, enforce the law? Or do they mean anti-legal immigrant? I don't think there's a single case out there that anybody can make that would allege anti-legal immigration. I'm like other Americans. I cheer the legal immigrants. I cheer the people that respect the law, and I embrace and welcome the Americans that are Americans by choice. They didn't happen to be a lucky American like me, that I'm born here out of happenstance. My parents made sure that I knew how fortunate I am. Instead, they looked across the border and decided, I want to come there and respect the laws and access all of the God-given liberties of being an American, and they could achieve their gifts here better in America. But those allegations are just simply, that is what happens when you have people with an agenda. They call names. And they don't give, by the way, a description as to why that's the case. They just call names. So we should know that they've lost the argument when they start calling names.
One more thing I want to get you to respond to. Senator Chuck Schumer was on Meet the Press over the weekend and offered what he thought could be a solution to some of the concerns raised by John Boehner when it came to passing immigration reform this year. We're going to give our viewers a listen in and then get your response.
Let's enact the law this year, but not let it actually start till 2017 after President Obama's term is over. Now, I think the rap against him that he won't enforce the law is false. He's deported more people than any other president. But you could actually have the law start in 2017 without doing much violence to it. You'd simply move the date back from December 31st, 2011 to December 31st, 2013 as to when the deadline for people who could get either legalization or citizenship, so we could go after the new people who come in later, and it would solve the problem. And make no mistake about it, David, this view that we can get this done in 2015-16 is false. You'll have the Republican presidential primaries that pull people over to the right. Tea Party maximizes. So simple. Let's say to our Republican colleagues, you don't trust Obama? Enact the law now, but put it into effect in 2017.
Congressman King.
Well, I disagree with the statement that the president has deported more people than any other president, and we've discussed that. But it's pretty interesting to see Senator Schumer propose that Republicans should pass a law that would take effect after Barack Obama leaves office. Not only does that give the nod to the lack of trust that the president has developed for a whole myriad of reasons inside and outside the immigration issue, but it concedes that point. So I would think that if I were Barack Obama, I'd maybe be a bit insulted by Senator Schumer that alleges that, okay, maybe we can't trust the president, but we should pass a good law now that can take effect after he leaves office. I think if we're going to pass any legislation, we can do it better in the moment than we can predict something down the line into 2017.
We're talking with Steve King, Congressman from Iowa's 4th District. Moving back to the debt ceiling conversation, Dee Dee Fredericks writes in on our Twitter page, Congressman King, please tell us what you expect to happen to debt when the debt ceiling is raised, debt now 100+% GDP.
I think that the debt ceiling now is about $17.3 trillion. And these are only estimates, and they're verbal estimates. I don't know if people know where this goes, but there's an expectation that the debt ceiling, if it's extended out to March 15th of next year, that it would meet or exceed the 18 trillion number. That's the discussion that's taking place among members of Congress here, something that would exceed 18 trillion. And for me, that's an appalling number. It's something that certainly was appalling to Barack Obama when he was in the United States Senate. We've got much of that dialogue that's out there in the statements that he's made. And, you know, I look at this, and I have 3 sons in their 30s. They don't remember a balanced budget any longer in their working time. And it looks like under some of these budgets that they will arrive at Medicare and Social Security, retirement eligibility age, having never worked in an economy, that had a balanced budget in their most productive years at least, although they started into the economy when we did have a balanced budget. And here come our grandchildren with a debt of about $54,000 each as their share of the national debt. We've got to pull this back.
Back to the phones. Joe is in the Bronx, New York, on our line for Democrats. Joe, good morning. You're on with Congressman Steve King of Iowa.
Good morning. My name is Joe. Joe. I call myself Joe the counselor from the Bronx, New York, not Joe the plumber. So I'm a counselor helping people. Now, Mr. King, I want to just talk to you a little bit. Now, I heard you said that the president cannot be trusted. Now, Mr. King, when the president said that if you have your, we'll talk about the ACA now, okay? You call it the ObamaCare. He said if you have your plan, you can keep it. So this man haven't lied. Let me tell you why he didn't lie. Please, let me explain myself before you make your statement. Every year, and you should have it too, every year, your plan, your insurance send you a booklet. I have my booklet right there. It tells me and it tells you the same thing too. Whatever month you can change your plan if you want it. and it gives you a little information about that. If you don't want to change it, you don't change it. Every year we get that. So this man haven't lied to no one. So this is you should be ashamed of yourself.
Hey, Joe, let's let the congressman respond. Go ahead.
Well, I'd say, Joe, first of all, I'd enjoy your company and your comments, but I didn't get to keep my plan. And I didn't have to line up every year and figure out how to go shopping for a new plan any year. I was able to get in a policy that I wanted, keep the policy year by year. It was able to be renewed. This year I had to go on ObamaCare on the exchange. And the policy that I have had over the last years, I like that policy. I was paying my share of the premiums, 28% as any member in Congress here was doing. Now I saw my premium increase under ObamaCare by $4,426 a year, and my deductibles triple. Meanwhile, there was only one policy in the whole United States of America that worked for me. So it wasn't that I had more choices, I only had one. And that one choice that I had was a lot more expensive, and it isn't just me. There are millions of people who have been pushed off their policies. Some people perhaps got to keep their policy, but I think they're the ones that had say, for example, in Iowa, the major company was able to cancel their policies December 30th of last year and renew them December 31st, and thereby buy another year where people got to keep their policy. But I don't think that analysis holds up, and I think when the president said, if you like your policy, you can keep it, that he had to have known that wasn't going to be the case, and I think that's what the evidence supports. Thank you.
Joe, I didn't mean to cut you off there. Did you have a quick response for the congressman?
Yes. I want to respond to him. And, well, I'm not going to respond to this one. Let me say something else to Mr. King. Mr. King, I love you, really, because that's what Dr. King always say. I love you, but you sometimes the only way to love someone is to love them, to try to help them. Mr. King, another thing you said. Now, you said that people who have jobs, this is what you ought to do. I oppose that. But if you tell me the jobs that you want the people to have is the Keystone Pipeline, the Keystone Pipeline, the Keystone Pipeline. First, the Keystone Pipeline was supposed to have 900 jobs. Now you all say 9,000. Now you all going to say 100,000.
All right, Joe, got your point, and we got other people waiting, but I'll give the congressman a chance to respond to Keystone Pipeline.
Well, Joe, I actually haven't said a lot about the Keystone Pipeline lately, although some months back I did. I'm maybe the only member of Congress that's actually worked on a pipeline. I was a swamper on the bending crew of a pipeline, and then I helped a welder on a pipeline. So I've been up and down the line and done my share of that work. And, we need to open up this economy. You can count the jobs that it takes to build a pipeline. That's probably a finite number. But the growth in our economy is a piece that is a multiplier. And, we have North American energy, and it is a cheaper energy than it would be otherwise. It's good for our economy. Anything we can do to keep our energy prices down is good for you, and it's good for me. Thanks for calling in, Joe.
Myland has a question going back to our immigration conversation. Congressman King, how many undocumented workers work on farms in your district, and what are you doing about it?
Well, they're hard to count. And, in my district, it's changed. I happen to live halfway between Denison and Storm Lake, Iowa. And each of those towns are packing plant towns. And I've watched as the population that was there when I was born and grew up has shifted. They've gone out and reached out into foreign countries to bring in foreign workers. There's a high concentration of that within those communities. On the farms themselves, we're mostly row crop grain and livestock, so it doesn't take a lot of workers, but it does to process the food. I don't know those numbers, but I have looked at it this way, is that I'm working on national policy. It is not a good policy for me to, say, go into Iowa and try to target a location and try to bring law enforcement to that location. It's better for me to be pushing this at the national level so everybody gets treated as equally as possible. And that's the stand that I've taken, and I think the people in the district know that. But I've stood strong together on defending the rule of law, and I'll continue to do that.
Barry writes in on Twitter, why would I vote GOP again after 2010 and only a handful of ones like Congressman King seem to represent my fiscal values? Let's go to Valerie waiting in California on our line for Republicans. Valerie, good morning. You're on with Congressman King.
Good morning, Mr. King. That $17.3 trillion debt ceiling is insane. But let me just tell you my experience with ObamaCare yesterday. I sat in Victorville, California at an urgent care clinic with my 85-year-old veteran father these insurance companies canceled his prescription plan, didn't tell us. He hasn't had his medication for 3 weeks, therefore he passed out in a store. I was the only white person, English-speaking, whatever you want to call me, in the waiting room, urgent care, with my dad. And I have a hard time believing that $2 million...
I think we're... Valerie, your line's breaking up. Are you still with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay, go ahead with your question quickly before we lose you again.
Okay, so I was in Victorville, California yesterday with my 85-year-old father. Obamacare insurance companies are canceling the prescription plans, and they canceled his. He hasn't had his medication in a month. He has dementia. He passed out. I was the only English speaker in the urgent care with my dad.
Okay. Congressman King, I'll let you jump in on her situation.
That's replete with several problems, I would think. Communications in that location was one of them, as just as you said. Another would be if it's his prescription drug plan, not knowing what that plan is. If that's Medicare Part D being canceled, that's the first I've heard of that as far as it being associated with Obamacare. I'm taking a note on this, and I know that my staff is listening too, and I'm going to ask them to come back to me on it. We'll take a look into that, but it's so important that you're there taking care of your father, and I'm glad to hear that you're able to at least help out in that circumstance.
Joe's out in North Dakota on our line for Independence this morning. Joe, good morning. You're on with Congressman King.
Hey, good morning, Congressman King. How you
doing, Joe?
This morning?
Just fine, thanks.
All righty. Hey, I'd like to ask if you know what the word projection means.
Production?
No, projection with a J.
Well, I think I know what the word projection means, but I've got a feeling there's a definition coming my way, Joe.
Yeah, there is. Definitely. It is to blame others for what you're guilty of committing, therefore you can get away with it. And that's the operation, modus operandi that your party operates under all the time. And also, Steve, you said that the separation of wealth doesn't affect people. Are you insane? Hey,
did you hear me, Joe? I actually didn't say that. I said I'm not noticing it in my life. And I didn't notice that that was the case until I see the news, and now we start to think about it differently. So it's not coming from inside out; it's coming from top down on that. That was a comment I made.
Yeah, but do the Koch brothers have any money invested in you in the state of Iowa? And Terry Branstad, do they own your?
Well, we have a state that's got a lot of broad investors in it, but I will tell you that, or a lot of ag and a lot of industry, most of the capital and the land is in the hands of the people that actually produce on that land, and I think they know that in North Dakota as well. And as far as the projection comment that you made, I would ask, go back and take a look at my votes. For example, the national debt of $17.3 trillion right now, if you'd have tracked my vote, if the rest of the folks in this Congress would have followed me over the time I've been in this Congress, we wouldn't have any national debt and we'd have a balanced budget. So I tend to do my job here and tell you the way it is, and then someone has to go back and take a look at the record and give me a fair shake on that. Thanks for calling in, Joe.
You bring up ag issues. I want you to talk about the Farm Bill for our viewers. Here's a story from the Sioux City Journal talking about the Farm Bill compromise that was developed, dropped Congressman King's amendment. If you want to talk about that amendment and your thoughts on the final Farm Bill that was signed.
Mm-hmm. Well, John, I brought an amendment to the Farm Bill that was a bill that I'd written several years ago in a broader context. I noticed that there were states that were passing laws that regulated the means of production of products that were traded in interstate commerce. And it's a constitutional violation. One of the enumerated powers for Congress is to regulate interstate commerce. And so, for example, they regulated ethanol going into California. That's what got my attention. That was litigated, and I didn't need to address it any longer. But we took this bill that was broader and narrowed it down to the list of agriculture products that were within the title of the Farm Bill now that existed. And then it became clear that California was regulating egg production outside its state to take effect in the first day of 2015. And it was just a happenstance that Iowa was the #1 egg-producing state. But for California to pass a law that regulates their egg production, makes them double their cage size. By the way, this was driven by the Humane Society of the United States, who are a large and effective political operation in this country. They passed a referendum in California that required the California producers to double their cage size. That didn't apply to the rest of the country, and so the California producers knew they could not compete in the egg market with the out-of-state producers. So they went to the legislature and said, give us protection. California legislature then passed a law that tells everyone in America, this is the kind of cage size you will have for your hens. And so, and we cannot have a patchwork quilt of 50 different states writing multiple regulations that apply in other states. So I've said this, California is free to regulate their own producers. They're free to over-regulate their producers. In fact, they're free to regulate them out of business, which is what they nearly did. But they are not free to regulate producers in other states. That violates the Commerce Clause in the Constitution. And so my amendment in the Farm Bill, the only single piece of legislation that was enacted that it directly addressed was the California legislation. That was taken out of the Farm Bill in the dark of the night, in the last minute, shortly before it came to the floor. And it is a fact that the Senate Democrats refused to discuss my amendment. They just said, we're not going to discuss it. And so at the last minute, Frank Lucas, I think, had the choice of whether we're going to take the King Amendment out or we're not going to have a farm bill. That's how it settled out in the end. This isn't over. This is just round one. America cannot tolerate a patchwork of these kind of regulations, and you will see a broad nationwide effort to put this thing back in its constitutional boundaries.
In the couple minutes we have left with you this morning, can I ask how your relationship is with Speaker Boehner? We can show our viewers a headline from a story from last month in which Speaker Boehner had some words for you amid the immigration debate, this related by a Democratic congressman who talked to Boehner.
Do you have to censor that, John, in order to do that?
Well, Boehner called Steve King a body part. On here is the headline of the story.
I mentioned this earlier. First of all, this says a lot about John Boehner than it does Steve King. That's probably enough said. But this is because John Boehner's been driving an agenda that I have defined as amnesty. And as that argument, his argument gets weaker and gets less support, the name-calling begins. And it should be beneath the dignity of any speaker. It should be beneath the dignity of any member of Congress to stand on the floor of the House of Representatives and make a remark like that to a member of your own side party, let alone to a member of the other party about a member of yours. And so that is a breach of decorum. It should not have happened, but it's out of frustration because we disagree on the issue, and it's simply name-calling and an attempt to marginalize. I think you saw last week what happened. That agenda, the principles that he rolled out, in spite of the fact that he hired extra people to deal with this, and they had all the power of the Speaker behind this, he couldn't even get his principles accepted by the Republican conference. And the arguments that I heard by dozens of members were the arguments that I have been making on immigration for a long time, but especially over the last 2 or more years. So I'm interested in the agenda, I'm interested in protecting the rule of law, and I'm interested in the proper destiny for the United States of America. A few remarks like that along the way, as I said, say more about him than they do about me.
I also want to get your response. We were talking to our viewers this morning about the story in the Washington Free Beacon, the Hillary papers. I think you made reference to that story. Have you read it, and what do you think it means for Hillary Clinton, if anything?
I didn't read through the documents. I saw a little bit of it on television, but the parts that I saw are things that I remember from back in the 90s. I think it says this. It serves to inform younger people that haven't happened in front of them, those that don't have the memory of the scandals that took place in the 90s. I think it brings them up to speed, and they can see that. And my objection to this would be, give you some insight into how Hillary operated. I think it's clear that Hillary knew about a lot of the affairs of Bill Clinton, and that she strategized politically to minimize that damage. And then when she said to America that it was a vast right-wing conspiracy, she knew the truth then. So I saw Bill Clinton say, I did not have sexual relations with that woman. And the video this morning, of course I remember when that happened. Couple that with Hillary Clinton saying it was a vast right-wing conspiracy. Neither one were telling the truth at the time, and they knew it. And I would pull back another ad that came out, which was Charlton Heston. I believe it was in one of the election campaigns, where he looked into the camera and he said, and he's speaking actually through to President Bill Clinton, he said, Mr. President, when you say something that's wrong and you know that it's wrong, that's a mistake. But when you say something that's wrong and you know that it's wrong, that's a lie. And I think that's what will burn in from this news that comes out today. They weren't honest with us then. would they be honest with us now?
Let's try to get in one more call with Congressman King. Jody is waiting in Corning, Iowa to talk to you, Congressman. Jody, good morning. Is Corning in the 4th District?
Good morning. Actually, it's
Morning,
Preston,
Jody.
and yes, and we miss you being here representing us.
Thank you, Jody. I miss representing Creston. It was in the old 5th. We just got redistricted out in the last election, John.
Yes, sir.
Jody, what's your
Unfortunately. Well, I have several. Real quick, I know it's the end.
You got time for about one, Jody. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, the immigration. Everything that I said is different than what they're coming out in the papers. Yes, I heard your speech on the floor yesterday. Excellent. Keep up the work. And the debt ceiling, this is ridiculous.
All right, Congressman King, in the last 30 seconds we have.
Both of those points, and I want to emphasize this, that we can't sacrifice the rule of law no matter what our hearts might say about some people that were brought here without their knowledge. That's a small group of the broader universe of people that in the country illegally. By that report that I mentioned too, John, Jessica Vaughn's, there's either 1.8 or 2 million that are in the United States that have been adjudicated for deportation that are still here. So there's that piece, but on the debt ceiling, we've got to get a handle on this. A nation should get to balance and stay to balance. I'm for a balanced budget amendment to our Constitution. In fact, of all the things we listed as an option, let's attach that to the debt ceiling and get it passed out of the Congress and then send it to the President and see what happens.
Steve King, Republican of Iowa, thanks so much for joining us today on the Washington Journal.
Thank you, John.
Up next.